In 2019, AEW was described by Cody Rhodes as the Ellis Island of professional wrestling, and for a time, it was. Vince McMahon's WWE was an oppressive, wildly erratic place. Basically, in that era, WWE created an environment in which a wrestler was almost lucky if they got to perform slop. AEW marketed itself as WWE's exact antithesis, literally a utopia in contrast to a dystopia. The platform was there for you to become one of the absolute best wrestlers in the world and perform in some of the best matches ever. Every wrestling promotion undergoes a decline at some point or another. AEW was no different. In fact, by 2024, the inverse was true. At some point, AEW to some was decidedly not a utopia, and at times it showed. Now, there's a lot of inference here based on body language, social media posts, and reporting. Sometimes you just have to look at the clues. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 wrestlers that visibly hated working for AEW. Number 8, CM Punk. CM Punk has outright stated that he did not enjoy the best of times in All Elite Wrestling. Surmising that a lot of people no longer wanted him in the locker room, he revealed to Ariel Helwani that he'd asked to leave in the wake of Brawlout. The self-destruction of CM Punk in AEW is a long, knotty tale, but to summarize more briefly, CM Punk joined AEW. Punk had so much fun early in the run that people accused him of going soft. He then produced career best level work. Almost immediately after this, Revolution 2022, enemy Colt Cabana was removed from his post as producer, replaced by friend Ace Steel. Colt Cabana sympathizers felt like this wasn't a coincidence, most infamously Hangman Page, who cut an unsolicited shoot promo on Punk. CM Punk held his nerve but gave Page a receipt months later. He then burnt the company to the ground at the All Out press conference, for which he was suspended. Punk went along with the untenable idea for Collision, which he himself hardly helped. His misery festered and spilled all over around Jack Perry's throat, for which he was terminated with cause. The fascinating stories only started to leak in late August 2022, but something felt off in the weeks beforehand. Someone had to play a role with a more heelish slant in his all-babyface program with Jon Moxley, but Punk seemed all too eager to go into footage during their first face-to-face confrontation, like he was unleashing real-life frustrations as opposed to telling a fictional story. Then there was the time he was meant to rally his fellow Chicagoans on the all-out go-home Dynamite. This spirited rah-rah speech was less than believable, since he interrupted a fellow citizen to call them a fat virgin. Otherwise, Punk's output remained stellar. His spiky mood actually enhanced a story driven by obvious 50-50 politics. Number 7, Dr. Britt Baker. At time of recording, Tony Khan is doing that thing again. He's talking up Dr. Britt Baker as a great wrestling star who he loves and hopes to have back. He did it with Ricky Starks, and Starks is now in NXT as Ricky Saints. Baker very obviously loved working for AEW for those first few years. She was in her element as a heel who had become entitled by the fact that the early phase of the women's division was a vehicle for her talents. Across 2020 and 2021, she was in awesome form, uneven in the ring with some very high peaks, but relentlessly hilarious as a sardonic egomaniac. Then the backstage reports emerged. A very long-winded game of Am I the Asshole played out between Baker and Thunder Rosa. Rosa's professionalism was called into question, but the narrative shifted in her favor long after the shoot feud dropped out of the news cycle. Increasingly, Baker cut an isolated figure. By 2024, after making her return from what seemed like a genuinely awful spell on the injury list, she was a sporadic presence. It felt like she no longer fit in. She wasn't as funny nor as magnetic as she used to be, and the overall match quality in the division had improved in her absence. Then more reports emerged, and while there's two sides to every story, etc., she seemed to be making fewer and fewer friends. Baker defeated Serena Deeb on October 2nd, 2024. On November 13th, she defeated Penelope Ford, only to be confronted by Serena Deeb. Didn't we just do that? Nobody cares, Baker infamously said to the camera. She was right. The audience didn't care, and by gauging by the admittedly flawed metric of her body language, Baker was doing this dismissive bit genuinely. She didn't care either. Number 6, Ivelisse. Ivelisse has never lasted in a major promotion of renown. She has a reputation for being unprofessional, and this is a euphemism. She had a real shot of finally getting somewhere in AEW, because the AEW of 2020 was severely lacking in women's talent. This was the result of several factors. Things are rapidly, thankfully, changing, but a relatively very small number of women of age were available, since WWE's misogynistic monopoly years did not make for a training school application form. WWE had recruited many of the few who were willing to finally take women seriously 95 years after they won the right to vote. AEW had attempted to book around this green and shallow talent pool by importing experienced and acclaimed Joshi talents, but the worldwide pandemic had confined many of them to Japan by the time Ivelisse got her shot. Women's division was such that Tony Khan had struck up a working relationship with, of all promotions, Billy Corgan's NWA to fill out its ranks. Khan was likely very aware of the stigma surrounding Ivelisse, since rumors have haunted every run she's ever had, but needs must. Ivelisse did get her head down, but that is because she had a problem cooperating with Thunder Rosa, and basically just sat still and looked bored when Rosa attempted to apply a half Nelson. She looked like an uncooperative small child in that particular match. Number 5, the Hardys. The Hardys have since revealed that they weren't entirely happy in AEW. In an October 2025 interview with the I Love Wrestling podcast, Matt Hardy, not for the first time, bemoaned the lack of opportunities the brothers received, quote-unquote, especially towards the end. Obviously, it goes without saying that Jeff's issues with the law might have played a factor. In the cursed era of AEW, where the real and compelling feuds played out not only on Dynamite but on social media, Jeff Hardy had a go at CM Punk on Twitter when hyping up an upcoming match. This was when Tony Khan tried to make the Hardys interesting by turning them heel. It just didn't work, the Hardys were not interesting enough. This was a weird blend of the work and the shoot. Jeff Hardy was never confused with Nick Bockwinkel, but this was dumb even for him. Hardy wrote with a mocking tone that Collision is going to be another Saturday night of amazing action like it always is. We, the Hardys, only work one show a week because we're the Hardys. We prefer AEW Dynamite. The dimension of AEW Collision was designed for punks. So, what was this about? Was Hardy saying that he was going to half-ass it on the B show? And how would that look any different to the bleak half-speed Hardys match he did all the time? Was he daydreaming of the day he could finally do a terrible cinema match against the Dudley Boys? The Hardys were playing the role of a tag team who were fed up with the disrespect, but why bury one of your promotion shows and further drag out the toxic CM Punk discourse? This arc felt like an excuse for the passive-aggressive BS that has defined the Hardys for years. The thing is, this wasn't just an in-character tweet. Jeff buried a second AEW show in a July 2023 interview with Muscle Man Malcolm, moaning that Rampage was kind of a B show and stating that he wanted to appear more on Dynamite. In an actual Rampage segment, Jeff buried the Dynamite ratings and said he'd give them a boost. Frankly, Jeff should have thanked his lucky stars that he was brought back from suspension at all. Number 4, Miro. What the hell happened to Miro? The man joyfully hopped onto Twitch after making his AEW debut and beamed about the experience wearing the expression of a teenager who had just made prolonged eye contact with his first crush, which in Miro's case is WWE. He raved about the matches, the backstage culture, the caliber of the roster he was thrilled to be mixing it up with. After a less than stellar run as a video game enthusiast, he underwent an incredible evolution. He became the Redeemer, an unhinged man who believed he was a violent instrument of God's will. The act was sensational. Miro's screenwriter-tier promo prowess and monstrous in-ring performances were a highlight of 2021. This was some feat since he faced an absurd level of competition across AEW's critical and commercial peak. What happened after that though? Well, each story is disputed by each side. This always happens, so the only inconclusive point that can be drawn is that Miro felt he should have progressed to the main event. Tony Khan disagreed, and an impasse was reached. It was reported that Miro noped doing jobs. Miro refuted this narrative. The impasse continued until Miro popped back up on Collision periodically. It was a different Miro. As the Redeemer, he was stoic, resolute in his mission to break all before him to appease both God and his hot, flexible wife. By 2023, he just cut a dour, sullen figure lacking in enthusiasm. Those killer sound bites were absent from his diminished return promos. From both sides, this last run felt like a half-hearted effort to make it work, and it just didn't happen. Number 3, Jake Hager. Jake Hager is so bad at talking and expressing himself that at one point, AEW just made it a bit. He'd just stand there with a vacant dumbass expression on his face and would only offer a single word when prompted by Chris Jericho. A veritable big lug, Hager would barely emote when he was in the ring, often just doing his thing as if sleepwalking with his eyes shut. All of which is to say that it's impossible to determine whether Jake Hager visibly felt anything. Have you ever walked home and caught yourself wondering how you ended up where you are? Maybe you were preoccupied by the music in your headphones or some daydream, and you have zero recollection of walking the last few streets or how close you might have come to being run over. Does this phenomenon explain Hager never feeling like he was present? Or was he simply not sharp enough to remember that a key part of his job is emoting? In any event, Hager has since heavily criticized his time in AEW, telling Chris Van Vliet that Tony Khan can't make a sandwich, let alone a storyline. Hager claimed that Khan stopped caring about AEW after a while, and that he was a child who only wanted to play with his toys. Number 2, Jon Moxley. Hated is a strong word, but that's SEO in 2025. Hated almost certainly does not apply to Jon Moxley. It's almost an insult to the man and his commitment to his craft. This is a man who has fallen on spiked bats, taken headfirst bumps on exposed wooden boards, and overcome addiction and delayed time off to work to an extraordinarily committed standard. He truly cares about AEW, but passion is a word of several definitions. He cares about the ideals and the opportunity AEW holds and represents, and at times he expresses himself like those ideals have not met his exacting standards. This was apparent before he reflected this attitude in the guise as the leader of the Death Riders. You can tell when he doesn't believe in a storyline or angle. On each of the occasions he feuded with MJF, he either explicitly verbally buried the material, this is terrible television, or was so baffled and or uninterested that he forgot the night of the pay-per-view when cutting what was meant to be the serious Big Cell go-home promo. And what the hell was IWGP Heavyweight Champion Jon Moxley about? That run was just so drab. He entered a 3-star match era against a random and uninspiring series of opponents. The Death Riders re-energized him eventually, but think about the premise of the stable, which was his idea. Mox conceived of it because he knew AEW was not reaching its potential, and thought it might prove a useful method to get the fans to root for its babyfaces. He simply must have disliked, even hated, what it had become at some point or another. And number 1, Malakai Black. Here's a bit about Aleister Black, shared by Brian Myers on his podcast with Matt Cardona. In the QA portion of one episode, the subject of the disgusting attack on Bret Hart at the 2019 WWE Hall of Fame ceremony was brought up. Myers was asked why he didn't dive in. He said that he couldn't hear the commotion. Ricochet and Aleister Black had burst his eardrums by popping so hard for Triple H. This was obviously a joke, but it might say something about Aleister's reputation within wrestling. Does this man love WWE more than Vladimir Kozlov? On occasion, as Malakai Black, he was great in AEW. Certain trios matches were electrifying, his entrance and look were incredible. But whomever's choice it was, the fact that he was barely pinned but never seriously considered for a world title program was a noticeable disconnect. Another incredibly exhausting round of claims and counterclaims commenced from 2022, lasting until Black's eventual exit in late 2024. Did he want to leave? Why did he never seem to lose? It was difficult to decode Black's body language since he portrayed a spooky, menacing figure. If he looked miserable, that's because he was corrupted by the shadows or something. But it's funny that when he came within a gnat's hair of leaving, he was distributing hugs and getting all soppy. It's impossible to know this for a fact, but he looked utterly relieved. He embraced Adam Cole as if this long national nightmare was finally over. So, who knows with Malakai Black? Even if you think you know, he'll tell you you're wrong. He wasn't about to climb Mount Everest and plant the AEW flag at the top, put it that way. And those are our picks for various AEW wrestlers that just couldn't wait to get the hell out of AEW. Let me know what you think of the picks down in the comments below, and please subscribe to the WhatCulture Wrestling Podcast, coming at you every week with a variety of different shows featuring Adam Wilborn, Michael Sidgwick, and Michael Hamflett. For now, I've been Scott Tailford from WhatCulture Wrestling. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you soon.